Welcome to Divine Justice YouTube channel. The tension of the war in Ukraine almost divided the country into two. Critical and hot situation reports come from Ukraine's eastern and southern front lines every day. The breaking moments of the war on both front lines turn all the attention to the eastern and southern regions of Ukraine. Intense clashes continue for Soledar in the Donetsk region. The Russians concentrate their main efforts on offensive actions in the direction of Bakhmut and Soledar. Russian troops do not give up their intention to completely seize the Donetsk region. Heavy ground battles are currently underway, especially for Soledar. The Ukrainian army, on the other hand, repels Russian attacks around the clock. The Russian army suffers heavy losses. The resistance movements of the Ukrainian army against the Russian forces on the Donetsk front line are very important. Ukraine, which can also conduct counterattack operations while performing defense duties in these regions, does not seem to hand over neither Bakhmut nor Soledar to the Russians. Although Russia has concentrated its attacks on these front lines at the moment, it is impossible for us to talk about a clear gain of Russia in both cities. On the southern front of Ukraine, the situation is quite different. Ukrainian forces, which pressed the operation button in the southern regions of the country, made serious progress in regions such as Kherson, Melitopol, and Zaporizhia this week, as Russia turned its attention to the front lines in the Donetsk region, such as Soledar and Bakhmut. Knowing very well how to exploit the vulnerabilities of war, Ukraine carried out shelling attacks in the direction of Zaporizhia, near Malinivka, Gulyaipol, Dorozhenyanka, and Tokmachka a few days ago. In the direction of Kherson, as the Russians started to carry out attacks again, the Ukrainian forces increased their military security measures in order not to experience any danger again in these regions. In other words, the Ukrainian forces are trying to improve their tactical position in the Zaporizhia and Kherson directions and are focusing on counterattack operations. The latest example of this situation took place in the city of Melitopol, where Ukrainian partisan groups concentrate. Yesterday at 4 a.m., two big explosions were heard in Melitopol. Violent explosions in the eastern part of the city were also heard in the early morning hours in the area where the invaders were building in Berdyansk. As a result of these attacks, a dozen positions of Russian invaders were blown up near Melitopol, Zaporizhia region. The mayor of Melitopol, Ivan Fedorov, announced that a car belonging to the invaders was blown up yesterday evening before the explosions. In addition, a Russian base point was destroyed during the night of the explosions in Melitopol. The number and nature of the Russian troops on the blown-up base are not yet known, but it is known that the Russian FSB is concentrated and has many bases in Melitopol. The fact that Putin's most trusted and elite forces FSB is in Melitopol shows us that the region is very critical. Melitopol is now the main key to Ukraine's route to Crimea. While Russia is locked on the eastern front, it is constantly losing ground in the southern regions of Ukraine. This war strategy by Ukraine began to be seen on the front lines more actively, especially after the new year. With such mind games and counterattacks, Ukrainian forces occasionally draw the main focus of the fighting in the Donetsk region to the southern front lines. Prior to these explosions in Melitopol, the Russian occupying forces were also trying to attack this city. Russian invaders reportedly destroyed the Taras Shevchenko monument in Melitopol last night before the explosions. Ukraine's counterattacks in Melitopol, which seemed to be retaliation for these attacks of the Russians, attracted a lot of attention. At the moment, the Ukrainian forces seem much more active and advantageous in the southern regions of the country than the Russians. The situations in and around Crimea also affect the positions of the southern front lines. At present, the inhabitants of the peninsula are very worried about possible attacks by Ukrainian forces in and around Crimea. Especially Ukraine's drone attacks are the biggest threat to Crimea. For this reason, the people living in the peninsula still continue to leave. All these negative situations turn the socio-economic balances of the peninsula upside down. As Divine Justice YouTube channel, all of our findings are created by the work and analysis of our field warfare expert team and are based on data from the US, UK, Russia, and Ukraine Ministry of Defense and independent war analysis and monitoring sources. When we take a look at the Eastern Front, it is seen that the Russians have attempted offensives in many regions. In total, in the Donbas region today, the Russians carried out 3 airstrikes and about 50 missile attacks during the day. In the Lymansky direction, the Russians shelled the Nevsky, Kremenaya, and Chervonopivka districts of the Luhansk region. In the Donetsk region, in Spirna, Vyemka, Bilogorivka, Soledar, Bakhmut, Druzhba, and Severinya, the fires that broke out after the attacks caused damage to the cities. In the direction of Novopavlovsk and at Vuhledar, Prechestivka, Zolota Niva, and Velika Novosilka in the Donetsk region, The bombardment of the Russian troops were repelled by the Ukrainian soldiers and counterfire was opened. In addition, invading troops in the Krasnohorovka, Vesele, Avdiivka, Mariinka regions of the Donetsk region have carried out continuous attacks this week. However, the Ukrainian defense forces managed to prevent too many casualties in the invasions that took place in these cities. As critical clashes and counterattacks continue on Ukraine's eastern front lines, Kyiv denied claims by Wagner gang leader Yevgeny Prigozhin that Russian forces had captured the entirety of Soledar, one of the war's hottest spots. The town sits on an extensive network of salt mine tunnels, spanning an estimated 200 kilometers. However, a geologist noted that the tunnels under the city were of limited military value because they are too deep to carry equipment and there is little or no oxygen. While the mines may not be of great military value, capturing Soledar and the tunnels beneath it would be Moscow's most significant gain on the battlefield in months. However, in these areas, it seems very difficult to pass both the challenging conditions of the region and the defense sets created by the Ukrainian forces around it. Russia, on the other hand, continues its attacks on civilian targets without slowing down in order to overshadow the advantageous position Ukraine has achieved in the southern front lines. The capital, Kyiv, was attacked by S-300 anti-aircraft guided missiles from the north in the morning. Later, the Russians used high-precision weapons against Ukraine's critical infrastructure objects. Kh-101, Kh-555, and Kh-22 air-based cruise missiles, Caliber C-based cruise missiles, Kh-59 guided air missiles are some of the main weapons and military munitions used by Russian troops in inhumane civilian attacks. The Russians launched a total of 28 cruise missiles and 5 guided air missiles from various bases this week. 18 cruise missiles and 3 guided air missiles of the Russians were destroyed by the forces and vehicles of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in cooperation with units belonging to other components of the defense forces. While tensions continue to escalate rapidly on the front lines, Turkey, which has been trying to mediate between Ukraine and Russia since the beginning of the war, again tried to make moves to calm both sides. Turkey is ready to seek a local ceasefire in Ukraine and believes that neither Moscow nor Kyiv have the military means to win the war. Believing that this war will only tire both countries, Turkey, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's official representative, Ibrahim Kalın's statements to journalists had a profound effect on the agenda. Kalın acknowledged that the warring parties are unlikely to be ready to sign a comprehensive peace agreement in the coming months. However, presidential spokesman Kalın believes that the brutal cost of hostilities may soon force them to agree to local ceasefires in certain areas of the front. Turkey is ready to insist on a local ceasefire and de-escalation. Erdogan also reiterated that Turkey supports opening a humanitarian corridor for those injured in Russia's war against Ukraine. Turkey's efforts to de-escalate the war was considered a highly admirable step by the world's states and international associations. We hope that we can see the impact of these efforts on the battlefield as soon as possible. All rights of this video and text belong to Divine Justice YouTube channel. Thank you for watching us.